Alright, this has been super long overdue, but this is the updated Gauntlet Guide. I have basically been playing Gauntlets ever since they've come out. I think they are just a fantastic weapon overall. They got everything. They got that combos, right? They got the string game. Insane offstage, of course, and then pretty good KO options. So what's going to be in the guide? Well, what's going to be in the guide is the inputs, the combos, the strings, how to play offstage, weapon matchups, and also some legend tips I got for you guys. So to start off, we're going to get into the Gauntlet inputs, and pretty much what the goal is of that section is to just give you, I guess, an idea of what each move is meant to be and what I think of it as. So if you think differently, so be it. To start, Neutral Light is just a super quick stacked option. Downlight I find to be a combo starter that has some range. Sidelight is a string move that provides pretty strong damage setups and also is really good leading into KOs. Neutral Air has absolutely insane drift and is incredibly hard to punish. You can just spam this move over and over again, but it's also extremely important when it comes to reversing positioning off stage and also the combo and string game of Gauntlets. Side Air, probably the best move on the entire kit. Maybe that's a hot take, but it is insanely useful for recovering back to stage, and it's also great for edge guarding due to the angle it sends. Down air I honestly used to think was kind of bad, but as of late, I might have had my opinion change. It's a lingering stacked option that's going to cover below the user, and given it lasts longer than other gauntlet options, it can cover an opponent's dodge and as a result catch it, leading into more damage. Ground Pound, everyone loves this. It's a steerable hitbox that's either going to automatically activate once you get close to your opponent, or it can be manually released. And finally, Recovery, which is going to be one of your main on-stage KO options. Moving on into the Gauntlet combos, now basically everything on Gauntlets is going to be downlight based. So you have downlight into neutral light, side light, down air, side air, neutral air, and recovery. The only other combo I think you're going to be really seeing on Gauntlets would have to be neutral air into a gravity cancel neutral light. It's pretty consistent once you start getting a feel for it, and it's honestly not hard to input either. Now, when we're getting into Gauntlet strings, these are either going to cover pretty common dodges or are going to be inescapable when the opponent has no dodge. With a weapon kit like Gauntlets, there is so many paths you can take, so I'm only going to list the ones that I normally use or that are pretty common to see. Note that some of these can cover more than one dodge, but for simplicity's sake, I'll only be showing one of the ways it covers. Downlight Ground Pound is a great way to ensure a kill if your opponent has no dodge on the edge. Sidelight into a recovery is one of the most common ways to kill on Gauntlets. Sidelight into gravity cancel sidelight is a super common option as well. Usually people are doing this when they're trying to get a feel for where their opponent's going to dodge, since this does cover multiple options. Sidelight into neutral air can lead into multiple ones, such as a side air, a gravity cancel sidelight, which can be true at A+ decks, also a gravity cancel downlight. Both the gravity cancel sidelight and downlight can lead into a neutral air for an extension or recovery for the KO. When you do a neutral light, there's a couple options that you have that are pretty common to see. Usually you can do neutral light into sidelight, neutral air, or down air. When it comes to playing offstage with Gauntlets, the key here is to know what move works best and to know your pathing ahead of time. Generally speaking, that means knowing how to utilize Sair, weapon throws, and ground pounds. To start, Gauntlet Sair is a great move to follow up any aerial offstage move, such as Dare, Nair, and even Sair itself. Usually once you connect your Sairs, it should be the beginning of the end for your opponent off stage. This is where you would seek out and time a ground pound or even a weapon throw and confirm the play. I do also want to mention that if you're below your opponent, there's two options I'd recommend going for, which would be recovery into Nair or just Nair itself. Gauntlets are very fortunate in the sense that when it comes to being below the opponent, it's hardly a disadvantage, but I would be mindful of clashes and getting outranged. And of course, I am definitely simplifying the process here, but this is a good idea of what you should be doing. Now, in the weapon matchup section, I'm going to give some brief tips on every single weapon and how I think gauntlets kind of perform into each one. For sword, there's two things I have in mind. The first is that you can get away with a lot of gravity cancels because of sword D-lights and also sword N-lights. Gravity cancel is always on the table when you're playing gauntlets. Also, avoid positioning to where you can be caught by a sword recovery. Gauntlets don't have a great answer to this unless you can catch them with a dare at a certain point in their recovery or a side air, which you have to be on the side to do that. With hammer, I have 4 points, and those are to be careful off stage. Hammer recovery is your absolute biggest enemy on gauntlets and can completely reverse the situation you're putting yourself in. Just like sword, make sure to play closer to the ground and also utilize gravity cancels. Things like downlight, neutral light, and even side light I don't think are that great against gauntlets, and it opens up a wide variety of possibilities. Make sure that you're fighting hammer horizontally, not vertically mainly, and also aim to bait out the attacks before moving in, right? You want to avoid stuff like nair, dare, and a lot of the times you can bait these moves out, even recovery, and it just makes it way easier on gauntlets, but that's not to say you can't just push the pace and build momentum and fight it like the next weapon we're going to talk about, which would be axe. I find axe to be super good for gauntlets most of the time. In 2v2s, double axe is very good, so it can feel a little bad, but at the same time, all it takes is one interaction to get the momentum started, so make sure that you are playing off that, because gauntlets are faster, so the more momentum you have, the less the axe player is going to be able to feel like they can even breathe and do something. The moves you're going to want to look out for are axe downlight and side air. Downlight is a fast anti-air, and a side air is a great KO option with insane drift. This means they're going to be able to catch you on their back foot while you're pressuring them, so if you are in red, just be aware of the side air threat in particular. And of course, probably axe's biggest disadvantage into gauntlets. The offstage, you're going to be able to find a lot of side airs, a lot of ground pounds when they're doing axe recovery. The key is to get it early or super late when they're still in recovery frames. When it's kind of in the middle of the move, that's when you might be running the risk of getting spiked, and you can just kind of completely nullify that, right? Going from a great matchup to one that I think is probably the scariest matchup for gauntlets right now, that would be bow. Bow has an answer to just about every single move gauntlets has. I think the better that you can react to bow downlight and sidelight, the easier it's going to be to pressure and rack up the damage. I can't say this enough, right? The worst thing that you're going to be able to do is be stuck above bow, because moves like neutral light and neutral air on it make it so tough to land against, and gauntlets do not have a good counter for those. Two things that I find that help me on Lance are to stay on top of the opponent. It's very hard for Lance to cover the user right above. Also, if you're going to catch your opponent charging Lance recovery, make sure to look for gauntlet neutral air, side air, maybe even a ground pound. It just depends where you are. Just go from there, but don't underestimate Lance off stage though. Lance down air and Sarah are going to be annoying at the very least. Another tougher matchup, against Qatar's, confidence is going to be key here. Stay grounded and use downlight for pressure. Also, speaking from personal experience, offstage is going to get very messy, so unless your edge guard is just about guaranteed, it might be better to just stay on the stage. On orb, due to the punish game, you're going to have to be extremely careful with how you approach. Orb is great at keeping you at a distance, so utilizing downlight to counterattack I find to be very crucial. If done right, playing against blasters is going to feel so good. You just have to make sure you're keeping your pressure up in this matchup, so try and stay on top of the opponent as much as you can so they can't space you out. Something to keep in mind though is that when you're fighting blasters off stage, don't be afraid, but just be aware that blaster down air and blaster neutral air are always going to be on the table, especially neutral air. Against Greatsword, this is a matchup you don't see often, but I do think that Gauntlets can do great into Greatsword off stage. No pun intended really, but I think that if you're able to kind of bait out recovery and just put your opponents below you, then it can become kind of hard for them to make their way back. With that being said though, you need to be very wary of Greatsword Sair and Dare, as they are great tools to stuff out the approaches underneath. On Spear, a key thing is to try and bait out moves like sidelight and recovery. Also, being directly below spear can make it really easy for the spear player to hit you with down air, and that's just super annoying, and it's just a position you should always avoid. Another no-no is probably not gravity canceling that much, because this is going to give them at the very least a double D-light, possibly a triple D-light string depending on the map. Versus Scythe, you're not going to want to play in the air too much. The risk versus reward is not normally in the Gauntlet player's favor. Next, make sure you're choosing your spots very carefully off stage versus Scythe. The turnaround potential this weapon has is just completely ridiculous. Finally, you can use gravity cancels sparingly and when you know you won't get punished for them. Otherwise, you're going to get caught in like 3 to 4 moves guaranteed. Cannon is a interesting matchup. I think Gauntlets actually might be a little favored here. The nature of Cannon is that I find it to be quite a high pressure weapon, so usually there isn't a need to push the pace yourself. Something that is super worthwhile to note is that a lot of Cannon players are relatively the same, so things like gravity canceling and hitting a move into a chase dodge side air are very common habits from them. If you can avoid these, then punish opportunities are for sure going to open up, just don't overextend. Now in the Gauntlet Ditto, something that is huge is patience. That will always be key. Another way to mix things up are using weapon throws, because they can possibly bait out a dodge. Also, don't always look to punish your opponent with the same move that they did to you. A good example would be if they side air and then you try and side air punish. Instead, look for something like a D-Light combo to maximize the damage that you can get. Battle Boots just released, but they are a weapon that I believe can contest Gauntlets on stage quite well due to their quick nature. Offstage, however, it seems that Gauntlets generally will have the upper hand, especially if you can pressure well with ground pound. And finally, as lame as it might be, this just holds true. The better player is just always going to win. Starting off with the legend tips, we have Vow. Down sig can be great for zoning and can set up early into recovery very nicely. If anything, it offers the opportunity for you to catch your opponent's landing. On Wushang, there are 2 strings that I find to be extremely helpful. The first would be downlight into down signature, and the second would be downlight again, but into neutral signature this time. They're both unjumpable and are great KO strings. On Petra, sidelight into a gravity cancel neutral sig is a great option if you're noticing your opponent dodging up. On Core, we have sidelight into gravity cancel down sig because it is great for covering down dodges and also is a great KO option. On Cross, you can do downlight into a neutral sig, which is unjumpable and can KO extremely early. With Caspian, you can act out of the neutral sig very fast, making it quite a spammable option. Also, all the sigs have just straight up broken force. Zariel has quite a simple yet effective tip, and that is that the neutral signature is a fantastic recovery option. With Rayman, a good mix-up can be slide charging the sigs off platforms or the map. Down signature is also just absolutely crazy for ledge coverage, so a map like Demon Island is just fantastic for this legend. Onyx's down sig is just super fast. It's a great signature just to rip in neutral if you're seeking a knockout, but also don't underestimate the side sig, especially if you gravity cancel it, and neutral sig can even be strung off of D-Light. On Tezca, you can do D-Light into side sig unjumpable, which does about 41 damage to a 5 defense legend. This can work up to 60 damage, but it becomes a bit more difficult to hit. At 70 damage or higher, this string does not work from what I've tested. One of my favorite ways to use neutral sig on Mordex is if you're facing someone who weapon throws down a lot. This signature is perfect for weaving around it, and it's also the most practical use of the signature. I hope you found this guide to be useful, and a huge thank you to my editor Xed for helping me put this together. This took a long time to make, so of course, if you'd be so kind to like, comment, and subscribe to help me with the algorithm, that would be amazing. Also, if you open the description, you can find my Discord, Twitch, Twitter, and even my coaching service if that's something that interests you. I can't always promise that this guide's going to be up to date, but at a core level, there will be information here that will always hold true to Gauntlets. Aside from that though, thank you if you watched till the end, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.